Joining me now live from Westminster, Conservative MP Steve Barclay, who was on the Public Accounts Committee today, a former member of the Financial Services Authority, as 'twas. Mr Barclay, a very good evening to you. Do you agree with Margaret Hodge? Is Google doing evil?
No, I don't. I think Google's an important employer. It's a valued business. But there are legitimate questions as to whether the legal structure set up by Google is actually the reality of what is happening on the ground. And really that was the crux of the discussion today, whether in practice sales are taking place in the UK when Google is using a legal structure which suggests that all the sales are taking place in Ireland.
OK, Matt Brittin made it very clear today that he stands by the evidence that he gave you in November. Are you satisfied that he didn't mislead Parliament?
Well, his position moved clearly from what he said in November. He was very robust in November in terms of saying that there was no sales activity taking place. And what we established today was that we have significant numbers of people with sales in their job title who are paid often 3 or 4 times their base salary in commission. That in actual fact, a lot of the economic activity on which the profits are based are being generated within the UK, and those staff are even able to negotiate on price within certain set limits. And that really goes to suggest that actually what they're doing, as any of your viewers would regard, is sales. And that's not what he was saying in November.
You don't like the way you've made it very clear that the company is arranging its tax affairs. There's been plenty of criticism about what happens with Starbucks and Amazon. What's going to change here? Because at the end of the day, the companies are abiding by the law. Surely you need to change the law, do you not?
Absolutely, and that's why the Prime Minister has made this a priority with international partners. There's a lot of work going on with particularly the French and German governments, and even within MPs. I met 2 senior French MPs myself last month on this issue. So there's activity at an international level happening. In the autumn statement, the government also committed more resource to HMRC, because part of the difficulty here is you've got very well financed companies going up against HMRC on complex issues. Yeah, okay, and so it's quite a difficult challenge.
But hang on that point, Mr Barclay, HMRC made it very clear today it doesn't need additional resources.
Well, it said that there's areas where the law was unclear. But for example, on permanent establishment, they admitted in the hearing today to me that there wasn't a single case law example from the UK where they put that to the test. So there's been challenge on transfer pricing, but there's areas in terms of companies like Google where there have been insufficient challenge so far.
Do you think HMRC is being outwitted?
Well, it needs more resources, and the government's committed to giving it more resources. To be fair to HMRC, and it's probably an unfashionable view to ever be fair to the taxman, but the majority of cases, over 80% of the cases they take to court, they win. So they do have a very high success rate. The concern really we explored today was whether perhaps they've been too risk averse, or whether they didn't have sufficient resource to really take on these big, powerful companies with very complex arrangements, where legally on paper what they're doing is defendable, but the practice of what their sales staff are doing on the ground actually is flouting the law, and that's really what we're trying to get to the bottom of.
Should you be taking on powerful companies, as you put it, or should you be taking on their accountants? You went for the man from Google today. It was the man sat next to him, you might argue, Ernst & Young, that advised him on this.
Well, I did point out Ernst & Young were the auditors to Lehman's, and that they've been subject to Senate investigations and various other things. So I do think in the hearing we did get out some of the issues in terms of the tax partners. And we did have an hearing with the Big Four tax advisors and made a number of recommendations just last month in some sort of concerns the committee had. Indeed, you reported those at the time.
OK. Steve Barclay, MP on the Public Accounts Committee, thank you very much for joining us.